Today, I'm going to talk about two of my favorite topics recently. We're going to talk about the vagus nerve, number one, and number two, ketosis. You already know about the vagus nerve as to why I'm interested in this. And ketosis is a form of using specific type of energy for your body. And I've been interested in this because of fasting. Fasting can cause ketosis. And I talked about fasting during COVID and more recently also because of cancer. There has been a proposed theory of using ketosis to help fight cancer. And when I found this article on the use of vagus nerve and ketogenic diet to cause ketosis, I was interested and I thought I have to study this. And what's more, this paper that I studied is really old. Well, not that old. It's about 25 years old. And I thought that was really interesting to look at some information from the past and see what these guys, what that specific author knew in comparison to some of the more recent stuff I've been learning about the vagus nerve. So I'm going to give you a bit of a background on this and a summary and how these two specific approaches can be used to help people with epilepsy. So I want to learn more about the metabolism. And because this is used specifically for treatment of epilepsy, I wanted to delve deeper into this. My name is Dr. Mikola Rashik of Neurogenomics, and let's get started on this. And first of all, this video is sponsored by Parasim. It's a company that develops vagus nerve neuromodulation devices. If you're interested in this, check out a link in the video description below. And you using this link, you can get a discount for such a device. These devices are certified in Europe. But big news, big news. They've also just started selling them in US and Canada, but they had to rebrand it. So the device is called NeuroSim in Europe, and in US and Canada, it's now called Neuropod. As far as I understand, it's exactly the same thing. It's just now a different name and slightly different color. The device is the same. If you want to learn how to use such device and what are the, for example, contraindications, check out one of my past videos on that topic. All right, let's get started. So this particular paper from 25 years ago was about the use of vagus nerve activation and ketogenic diet to help people with epilepsy. So I was obviously super interested in this. Right on. So let's talk about the vagus nerve first. What's fun about looking at old literature like this is that you can learn information that from the past, right? You can learn how they were viewing things at the time, right? And this is fairly soon after vagus nerve activation was actually approved as a medical treatment for epilepsy. And it recounted a history of how it all started. It was started by a scientist, again, memory. I think his name was Dr. Zabara, and I probably messed it up, but either way, this guy was interested in the potential of vagus nerve activation for epilepsy for two reasons. It was already known that vagus nerve is involved in the vomiting reflex, and that can also, I guess, can be also associated with certain epileptic attacks or seizures. And number two, it has also been known that vagus nerve can affect your electroencephalogram. I hope I pronounced that right. That's basically measurement of your brain waves. You can measure these things, and these brain waves can have specific pattern depending on the condition or state of your brain. And because of these two aspects, and seizures can also affect your, so epileptic seizures can also alter this encephalogram pattern. And because of this, this individual was interested in the possibility, hey, can vagus nerve modulation be used to treat epilepsy? And this was in the early 80s. So by mid 80s, this individual started already doing animal studies. It clearly showed that indeed, when you activate the vagus nerve, that reduced the epileptic seizures. The very first study on a human was done in 1988. And indeed, a person with epilepsy was being treated via activation, via a device that this individual designed. It was mimicking what we use for heart as well. And it's an invasive device. And this person stopped having seizures. So this followed very soon in the early 90s to mid 90s by a series of clinical trials. And very quickly it was shown that indeed this invasive method for activating your vagus nerve, so the device was implanted in the neck, and electrical impulse would activate the vagus nerve. It was very effective for helping people with epilepsies. So as a consequence, this method for treating epilepsies was then approved in Europe in 1994, and it was soon followed in the US. By 2001, when this article was written, the author mentions that more than 10,000 individuals already had this surgery all over the world. So, huge success story. What did happen overall? This type of vagus nerve activation reduced not only the frequency of seizures, it also reduced the severity of seizures and also improved the quality of life. And this part is actually quite interesting and fun, because what does that mean? It improved the quality of life. It improved these individuals' mood and improved their focus, their concentration, their verbal skills, etc. And the really interesting part is that this happened even if they were non-responders, meaning even if the device did not do anything for these seizures, the quality of life typically improved as well in such individuals. So it shows you how even early on there were these additional benefits to vagus nerve activation that I've been talking a lot in many of my videos as to why it's of great benefit to activate your vagus nerve, and why I see vagus nerve as a barometer of your health, of your general health. Over time, we've also discovered what are the potential side effects by activating your vagus nerve via your neck. Check out one of my past videos. And it has to do with the fact that such activation of the vagus nerve can activate the fibers that go from your body to the brain, but also from the brain to the body. And those fibers that go from the brain to the body, they can inadvertently activate certain muscles, and which can lead to unwanted side effects. So check that out. These guys didn't really touch upon that too much in that article, but now we know this. And since then, the evolution of activation of the vagus nerve has moved on via skin. And we have, as far as I understand, we also now have certain approvals for use of such vagus nerve activation for medical uses. And now we also know from, as you know from my videos, we can now also activate your vagus nerve via ear, via tragus. It's this part of your ear. You can't see it. I have very shaggy long hair right now. And that is considered as one of the safest now methods as well. And the reasons why is because you do not activate those fibers that go from the brain to the body, only the fibers that go from the body to the brain via this method. So very interesting stuff. Also, they talked about as to why the seizures might have been reduced via vagus nerve activation. That's actually not fully understood yet. Several methods have been proposed. One of this is that it could be helping release certain neurotransmitters inside the brain. So these are the chemicals that allow neurons in the brain to communicate between one another. Reduction of other precursors to neurotransmitters, and also helping with that brain activity as well. So it was referred to as help to desynchronize that electroencephalogram activity. So what does that mean? Your brain, when say you are relaxing and you close your eyes, your brain can go into a similar pattern of behavior. And then if, say, you open your eyes and you're starting interacting with the world around you, there's many different activities. And so this means your brain can get desynchronized, as opposed to, let's say, if you're relaxing and you have your eyes closed. But something similar can happen during epileptic seizures, when brain activities can be synchronized towards causing seizure, and vagus nerve can help to desynchronize that pattern as well. So there's some theories, but it's not fully, at the time it wasn't fully known, and I don't know if it is still fully known exactly how vagus nerve activation helps protect against seizures. All right, so this is one method, and they mentioned that at the time, this is the second most used treatment for epilepsies, of course, after drugs. Let's move on now to the ketogenic diet. So let me give you a little bit of a background here. What is ketosis and what are ketones? It's a specific type of fuel that our body can use. So let's break it down to what kind of types of fuels we use. We use glucose or sugars or carbohydrates. All of that involves sugars. Those are our primary fuels. Those we can use very rapidly. And we can also use fats, okay? So fats is colloquial terms. Scientifically, you can say fatty acids. So fats are made out of fatty acids. You can break down fatty acids to use as fuel. They pack a lot of fuel. You can get a lot of energy out of fat, but they're very slow burning. And these fatty acids cannot be used by the brain. So your brain is really, really hungry for sugar. All right. But under certain circumstances, when your sugar is gone, such as you're fasting, you're not putting anything in your mouth for days, your body can start using fat that you have stored and break it down into smaller components called ketones. And those ketones, these smaller components of fat, can then be transported to the brain, and your brain can use these ketones for energy. And it's been discovered early on in 20th century that ketones, when the brain uses ketones, it helps reduce seizures in people with epilepsies. As a matter of fact, this was according to this article, part of medical curriculum for decades, that this is one of the methods to help people with epilepsies or with seizures. But this lasted till maybe around 1980s. And then what happened is that information started to be removed from medical curricula. And the reason why is because new drugs came on board, and that became the primary way of treating people with epilepsies. And the information about food was simply phased out from as a use of treatment for these people. Nevertheless, this was established fairly early on in the first half of 20th century by many institutes. And the article reminds us that this was fairly effective, but it's effective for people. The younger the person who had to go on a ketogenic diet, the better. Now, this ketogenic diet, what is that? It was a 4-to-1 ketogenic diet, meaning for every 4 parts of food had to be fat, 1 part was composed of protein and carbohydrates. So if you think of it this way, for every, say, 80% of food intake would be fat, then the remaining 20%, 3/4 of that 20% was protein, and only 1/4 of that remaining part was carbohydrates. So very, very little carbohydrates. Astonishing, because of course the vast majority of our current North American diet is made up of carbohydrates, right? It's the primary source of fuel that we have. And typically the children would be taken to the hospital. They would do 1 day of fasting, and then they would go on to this ketogenic diet. they would be observed, and they would get supplements such as multivitamins, minerals, calcium, vitamin D, and vitamins B, assortment of vitamins B. And then parents would be trained as to what to do, and they had to go on this very, very strict diet. And adherence to this diet was key to success. Literally, you could mess up everything by taking one single cookie, and everything you worked for could be gone. So not an easy thing to achieve, obviously, but it could be quite successful. And they mentioned some of the older studies that indicated that well over half of the participants in such studies would show that they could exhibit more than 50% reduction in their seizures. Now, there's also potential problems with this, so hyperlipidemia, so it could be an issue with such a diet, so you do have to be careful. There's other issues. They mentioned potentially developing kidney stones, constipation, gastrointestinal issues, and even other issues, but they're more rare. So it is important that this has to be done under medical supervision. And there's also contraindications. You cannot use this diet with certain conditions, certain metabolic issues. So this is also not for everybody. But when done for the right people and done accurately, it had success rate. And again, not really well known as to why why this method really works. There was again some theories. Some of it was that it helped to properly provide great energy source for the brain, and that could improve the circulation in the brain. Another one was that it would reduce these inhibitory or increase the inhibitory neurotransmitters in the brain as well, and that could help reduce the seizures. But main one was that it helped certain energetic components of the brain, right? It's hard to figure these things out, right? When you're dealing with brain, I suppose. And again, this is 25 years old article. But this all got me thinking, this is really, really interesting. And the reason why I'm interested, like as I mentioned, is because ketogenic diet has also been proposed as a potential method of helping people with long COVID and some of the issues we're having post pandemic. And I might be touching upon that in another video, but I wanted to see, has anyone looked at both of these in tandem using both the vagus nerve activation as well as ketogenic diet? And yes, it has. In fact, there has been a more recent paper that looked at this, but it's heavily understudied. This particular study was from only 2020, and they looked at 30 some kids, and they put them on ketogenic diet and vagus nerve activation, and the results were quite astonishing. Talking about nearly 90% of all participating individuals showed some reduction in uh, seizure frequency. About 2/3 of them showed more than 50% reduction. And for every additional month of being on such a treatment, they were followed for 2 years, by the way. For every additional month, increased the reduction in the epileptic seizures and issues, related issues, by about 6%. And by 15 months of the study, every single participant exhibited some benefits, whatever they might have been, either fewer seizures or the severity of the seizures decreased. Right, so it's very encouraging. And that paper also mentioned one more other paper, and that's it, from 2007. Again, just about 30 kids that were being studied. Similar results, similar idea. Approximately 50% of the participants in that particular study also showed 50% or more reduction in frequency of seizures. And what's really cool is that paper also mentioned it didn't matter whether you started with the ketogenic diet or the vagus nerve activation. it still had these beneficial effects. So interesting combination that we have known for a very long time, but we rarely applied them together. And I thought I would bring it to you because it is definitely being studied, but heavily understudied. I am interested in the metabolism, so I want to be investigating this for the reasons I already mentioned, including the theory that this could be an approach to use for cancer, not via the ketogenic diet, but via fasting. I'm also interested in fasting myself, including making videos in the past for use of fasting for helping with spike protein related issues. So check that out. Please like, please share, or subscribe if you haven't already. This is how we grow. You know how YouTube loves these algorithms. YouTube loves this as much as any kid loves cookies, right? So I'm sure you understand. And also, please check out my Patreon account if you haven't already. This is where, if you are supporting Patreon, you can vote and decide as to what content makes it to YouTube eventually. So my supporting patrons pre-screen almost all of the content I produce before it makes it to YouTube, and there's additional perks. And you can also be free, so free patron as well. There's free content there as well. All right, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.